The Canon 80D versus the Sony A6600. One is the old reliable DSLR that has been such a success, people still use it 4 years later. And the other is a cutting-edge, mirrorless hybrid that has really impressed me for what it can do in such a compact body. But should you spend the extra money to get the new hotness? Or can the old reliable work just as well? Let's find out. What's up everyone, I'm the Everyday Dad, and if I can figure it out, you can figure it out. Cameras, man, I don't know what it is. I genuinely just love messing around with them, and I love making these videos, and it's always tough when it comes to cameras that are legitimately still usable and work fine, but you know, that march of progress always marches on. So there is a balance though, right? It really comes down to price, usability, and quality, and somewhere in the middle of all that, you'll find the balancing point and the camera that's right for you. So let's find out how these two could balance out for you. And before we get too far into the video, however, I would like to thank my friends over at B&H Photo for loaning me this Canon 80D for the last few videos, and the A6600 is my own personal camera. And if you'd like to get either of these, there will be links in the description below. To the video! First up, let's talk video quality. Both of these cameras are considered crop censored bodies. Now, if you've never heard that term before, basically what it means is they have an APS-C size sensor, just meaning that it's smaller than full frame, like the Lumix S1H we're recording on right now. Basically what that means to all the non-camera folk out there is that you'll gain a 1.5 times crop on the Sony and a 1.6 crop in the Canon. So just take whatever lens you are and multiply it by that number to figure out your field of view. Both of these cameras do have a 24 megapixel sensor, with the 80D being able to record up to 1080p 60 frames per second. The Sony can match that, but it can also do 4K at up to 30 frames per second. When it comes to that though, and it comes to resolutions, yes, the Sony wins as it can do 4K and the Canon can't, but there is a little more complexity here in that the Canon can record its 1080p in a very beefy all-eye codec, basically meaning you can have more flexibility in post than you can with the Sony when you're shooting in 1080p. Another big difference is the Sony A6600 also has unlimited recording. So long as you give this media and power, it will continue to chug along, while the 80D has a very stills oriented, it's like a throwback. It has a 30-minute recording limit in all modes. The 80D comes equipped with the very popular dual pixel autofocus, which for its time was the absolute best on the market. At the time, because the A6600 has Sony's face detection system, which is absolutely the best I've ever seen. The A6600 can also do eye detection autofocus while recording in video and when taking stills, while the 80D can only do face tracking. However, if we're being honest with each other, they're both so good that you'll never notice the difference. I mean, will you really be able to tell if one is half a second faster than the other when it comes to video? Probably not. Both are good and will not do any weird wobbling stuff in the background. And lastly, the big spec that I want to talk about is stabilization. The A6600 has built-in in-body stabilization. That means it should take a little bit of the shake out of it when you're using it handheld. So the sensor inside of this camera will move around a little bit inside of the body and can combine with Sony's lens stabilization to make an okay platform if you're just using it right in your hand. The 80D has stabilization called "it's big and it's heavy, so your arms probably aren't strong enough to move it that much." BAH stabilization for short. Honestly, the 80D is probably the better stabilized camera because Sony's IBIS, it's never been that good, and the body is just so light that micro jitters can absolutely make their way into your footage, and especially if you are a caffeinated person like myself, you will see shakiness in this footage. But the extra heft of both the 80D's big DSLR body and those bigger lenses will make it harder to shake. It will also make it harder to hold up for longer, sure. I mean, it's a trade-off, but it will make it more stable in those short bursts. Now, those are the specs that I really care about because those are the most important ones to the video coming out of the camera, especially for us online content creators. So let's talk about how does that technical image quality look? Well, I really want you to see if you can tell much of a difference between the two. Because on my display, as I'm editing this, there is a huge difference in sharpness, dynamic range, and clarity. The Sony image is amazing. The Sony footage was recorded in 4K, which actually has a 6K sensor that downsamples to 4K. But if you're watching from your much preferred content consumption device, mine is an iPhone, you might not be able to tell much of a difference. And if you can't tell the difference, do you really need a new camera? I know that's a shocking thing for a camera reviewer, like a camera channel that talks about gear. It's shocking to say you might not need one, but this is how you're gonna find out. You watch these videos and you tell me if you can tell the difference, and then you will be able to decide what you need. Color-wise, I think both cameras do perfectly fine. It will really boil down to your personal preference. Some people just swear by Canon, and some people just swear by Sony, and there are just as many people that hate both. If you have a real invested interest in the color science, pick which brand you like better. I mean, this video was never gonna convince you either way. I mean, it doesn't really matter. Nobody really cares about color science except camera people. Cameras anymore in the last, what, like 7 or 8 years, they're good enough. Dynamic range wise though, I do think Sony will have the edge here for a couple of reasons. One, like we mentioned, it's got a 6K sensor that's downsampling to 4K, so it has way more information than it should based on its codec. Plus, you have access to several log profiles like S-Log2, S-Log3, and HLG inside of the camera that the 80D does not have an equivalent for. You can download like fake log profiles and put it on the 80D, but you're not gonna get much out of it. And I mean, either way, both of these are 8-bit and they're not 10-bit, so you're not gonna get that much room on either camera, but things like the HLG mode on the Sony will give you a lot of flexibility in both your shadows and highlights, and it does more than it should. Either would work. We passed the good enough image quality for video work long ago, and this will come down, like I already said, to the color science that you prefer more. But audio isn't as even. Audio is pretty cut and dry here, and it doesn't really lend itself to personal taste in these mid-range crop sensor cameras, and both cameras do have, I mean, they have similar sounding capabilities. They both have a 3.5mm audio in and a 3.5mm headphone out. However, here the Sony wins by far and away. Yes, in both cameras, you can manually set the internal gain to get a little bit better recording, but the A6600 has much, I said it 3 times, it has much better internal preamps and can give you insane audio capabilities built right in to the 3.5mm audio in. Plus, if you decide that this is the system you will be using forever, you can build this into something a little more, like with the K3M, which is a device that plugs right into the hot shoe mount, but also gives you 48-volt phantom powered XLR ports, which is actually how I record a lot of my audio when I do use the Sony A7 III or the A6600. It's expensive, but legitimately fantastic. Next up, let's talk ease of use, because that's really where cameras win out in my opinion. Is the easier it is to use, the easier it is to make the videos, and then the more you will actually want to make them, which just, it makes everything better, right? And here there is almost no comparison. The 80D, heck, Canon cameras in general are like the standard. They are my standard when it comes to easy to use cameras. It's got that flip out screen that everybody wants. It's got a super usable body, great autofocus, and the menu system is super easy and very concise. Like, I seriously wish every camera made could have this same level of functionality. This should be the basis from which all other camera systems are derived from and built, and just everything. Maybe not the DSLR body, but everything else should be like this. And what's really great here is all the individual pieces that combine together to work even better. For example, you can stand in front of the camera and you can see yourself. You can also change the settings that you want from in front of the camera. And if you see the box around your face in the screen, you know your focus all right. Like that's everything you need. It's just so good. And what's even crazier about today's video is the Sony isn't all that bad. It's got a flip up screen, a much refined menu system, fantastic autofocus, and a really great auto system inside of the camera that just works. You don't really have to manually dial everything in to get run and gun video out of this. It's really fantastically easy to use too. But the touchscreen isn't touch enabled except for focusing, and that does make everything just a little bit harder when it comes to needing to make changes from in front of the camera. The body does have more customization than the 80D, so you can set this up in more of the ways that you would want. You can even change things like the shutter button can become a recording button, which basically should just be standard on all cameras, right? But it does help out a lot as Sony crop cameras, for some reason they put the record button in the absolute strangest places. Like, how would that, no, this just always have that enabled. Again, a lot like all of my videos, neither of these is actually bad. Both are easy to use, but the Canon is just like obscenely super easy to use. I love getting them in here on the studio because it just makes making these videos just such less of a hassle. So let's put the quality and ease of use to the test with a quick vlogging experiment. I didn't want to say test twice. See you out there. Okay, and welcome to the vlogging test between the Canon 80D and the Sony A6600. Now, normally when I do these vlogging tests, I have both cameras, like I have both cameras right out in front of me, but we don't do that today because I only have one SD card. I kind of forgot the rest of the SD cards back at the house when I came out here to do this vlogging test. We're gonna do them one after the other, but then we will overlay the footage on top of each other so that you can still see the difference. So yeah, this is the 80D. We are in 1080p. We've got this on a little tripod, and we're using this as a vlogging test. We've got a Rode Video Micro on top of it. So this is the stabilization, this is the image quality. This is everything you can see about it. Pretty heavy, beefy setup. But it's a standard setup. Like, it is the thing that Canon does, and I mention this all the time when I talk about Canon cameras, is how darn easy they are to use. I can see my face, I can see that I'm in focus, I can see the audio, I can see everything that's going on, and that everything's fine. But my shoulder is about to fall off. So hold on, let's switch to the Sony. Okay, and now we are on the Sony A6600. Now, we do have, the biggest difference that I can already tell is we do have the flip up screen, but the Rode Video Micro is definitely blocking it. With the fuzzy windscreen on it, I can't see it in any way, shape, or form. So hopefully that amazing eye autofocus is keeping us in focus, and I do have it in aperture priority mode with auto ISO on, so hopefully, I can't tell if the footage is any good, but hopefully you can tell, and hopefully it is, so we didn't like totally waste all of everybody's time by coming out here today. But the big things is, this does have in-body image stabilization built into it, like the Canon 80D did not have, so it might be a little more stabler. We do have a nicer lens on here that's just, it's the lens that I have. This is the Tamron 17-28, which is a full frame lens, but when you put it on a crop sensor camera, it becomes more of like a standard zoom lens. But yeah, this is the vlogging test. Again, same audio device, and we're just kind of hanging out here. I wish I could tell you more of what was going on in here, but this is much easier to hold. Like, I don't feel like my arm is falling off because of that DSLR, which is a big, you know, it's got that mirror in it, so it's got to be able to fit it in somewhere. So, okay, this has been the vlogging test of the two cameras. We're gonna head back inside because I'm gonna go play some soccer. See you back in there. And we're back. You gotta hate it when you forget SD cards, right? That's embarrassing. But we've seen how the cameras work. If you buy one of these, is there an ecosystem or upgrade path for you? Like I said in the intro, these are two different kinds of cameras, DSLR versus mirrorless. And in each of their respective types, they both are about the most versatile you are going to get. The Canon EF has an amazing amount of reasonably priced glass. Plus, the 80D is old enough that you can find accessories very readily and for very low prices. Plus, if you get full frame lenses, you can transfer those to bigger full frame DSLRs if you decide to upgrade in the future. And on that note, much like the EF glass, the E-mount is the most versatile in the mirrorless realm. There are some fantastic prime lens options out there from Sigma, and it's got that tiny 16-50, which it doesn't stand out the best optically, but for ease of use, it's amazing. I mean, you can also use all of the E-mount lenses on all of the E-mount cameras. So you could easily take a lens from the A6600, put it on the A7, I'm pointing to my A7 III, put it on the A7 III, and then if you wanna be even crazier, you could put it on the Sony cinema cameras. No kidding, it's the best in the future-proofness department. Is that a department? Maybe. The A6600 body is a new design, different from the other Sony crop sensor cameras though, so it might be a little harder to find things like cages and specifically built accessories until it matures a little bit. But they will be coming, so I'm not considering that a huge negative. But at the end of the day, so what, right? This is the so what, this is the symbol of so what. Which of these cameras comes out on top? It depends. All of these videos have been it depends recently. I wish camera companies would like more firmly like differentiate themselves so one could be objectively worse. But it depends. If you were looking for a newer used camera, that's gonna change my recommendation. If you're looking for a brand new camera, I absolutely recommend the A6600. This is such a fantastic camera and it will serve you well for years. There is a reason that I personally bought one. It's fantastic. But if you are trying to save some money and want basically the easiest camera ever to use, I have no problem absolutely recommending the 80D. It is a standard for a reason, and it's so easy to use that everything else just seems clunky. Even though the body might feel clunky when you're holding it, using it is so easy, everything else feels worse. And if you liked this video, I bet you'd like the one where we go a little more in depth on the 80D and whether it's worth buying by itself 4 years later. Click right here, click, 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 to find out. Thanks for watching.